So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us at our 9th Traditional and Renewable Energy Forum 2021. This morning we had already several very interesting discussions covering political issues, financing issues, development of infrastructure issues, how the changes of energy prices affect energy markets and investments into infrastructure, what is the European Union policies and trends in this area. And now we would turn over to Poland, our traditional neighbor and very important player in the Baltic region. And we will talk about a more political geostrategic matter, which is Nord Stream 2. As we all know, this project has been delayed by US sanctions for quite a long while. Then the sanctions has been lifted recently. Now it looks that this project will be completed. So the question is how it will impact the economic, geostrategic and market situation in the Baltic region and Europe as a whole. And to answer this question and analyze this issue, we have a very prominent speaker and prominent analyst in this area, Mr. Wojciech Jakóbik, who is the energy security analyst at a very prominent Polish portal, Business Alert PL. And he will tell us about the challenges, perspectives and possible impacts of Nord Stream 2, as well as the energy transformation in Poland and related matters. And the floor is yours.
Yes, sir. So I understood we are to discuss the issues you've mentioned. So I hope it will be active dialogue between us. I don't want to bore you with knowledge we all know in Poland and Lithuania, because the best part of our relation in energy sphere, in political sphere, in history, is that there are some things that are obvious for our nations and we have no issue in cooperating in those manners. And Nord Stream 2 project is one of those topics in which Poland and Lithuania have the same attitude, have the same conclusions, and actually they are working actively together to prevent this project from hampering the EU energy security, because we still can do that. It is questionable if it is possible to block the construction of Nord Stream 2 pipeline. We have just several kilometers left, so it is possible that the completion of Nord Stream 2 project is near. It was to happen 2 years ago, so it wasn't that we couldn't do anything, we didn't change anything when it comes to this project. It is already 2 years late. But it is possible that the construction will be finished somewhere in September, and that doesn't mean that the supplies would start immediately. There is a long way from a finish of construction until we start deliveries, until Europe is starting receiving the same natural gas that is coming through Ukraine now with a use of Nord Stream 2, because the first point when it comes to this project is that it is not bringing any new natural gas. It is about replacing the Ukrainian route with German route, with horrible negative consequences from the perspective of common security and foreign policy. It is obvious for Poland and Lithuania, but also from the market perspective, from the perspective of competition, from the perspective of common gas policy, common diversification policy, and in fact common climate policy. So from my point of view, if we want to lead a successful common climate and energy policy in Europe, Nord Stream 2 is an obstacle. It shouldn't never be constructed, and that would be the best solution for Europe. But we are far from such scenario. It is almost ready, but ready when it comes to construction. There is a long discussion ahead of us when it comes to supplies from Nord Stream 2, if they are even possible, because it is possible that they will never start. But
how come?
We are far when it comes to the project realization. We'll see how it goes, but Poland and Lithuania cooperation is really crucial in this matter.
Recently there was a German court decision, if I'm not mistaken, saying that the Nord Stream 2 project cannot be exempted from the requirements of the so-called European Union third energy package, which means the ownership of the distribution networks, transmission system networks, and suppliers have to be, decoupled. So as a result, Gazprom as the supplier cannot be owner of the transmission system, meaning of the Nord Stream 2. What is your opinion? How that will impact positively, negatively, if at all, the project and the supply of Russian gas via that pipeline?
Mhm. When it comes to EU energy market rules, they are always serving the EU customers. They are protecting them from monopolies like Gazprom. So, because Nord Stream 2 will have to implement EU third energy package, our market will be safer. It is not that only this prevents us from all negative consequences of Nord Stream 2, but at least it is giving some leash to prevent Gazprom from using the infrastructure for some foreign policy goals, because this foreign policy is hostile towards Poland, Lithuania. We can see it on borders of Belarus. So it is all interconnected. So those rules, when they are implemented over Nord Stream 2, will limit the possibility of using Gazprom as a weapon against our part of the world. It doesn't mean that it would solve all the problems with Nord Stream 2, because we have also other issues like market issue, like common policy issue, and so on and so on. But it is a good step, and in practical terms, it means further delay, because you need to introduce some solutions to make it work, to make Nord Stream 2 compliant with EU third energy package, and one of the solutions is selling Nord Stream 2 HV, the operator of Nord Stream, to some new company. Even if Russians are able to do that, it will take time and money. Time means more time for further diversification, for further works between Poland, Lithuania, other countries which are adversaries of Nord Stream 2, and money means greater economic risk for European partners of Nord Stream 2. They are waiting for 2 years for it to happen. They want to count money, and they are counting the days of delay of Nord Stream 2. So Nord Stream 2 is increasingly risky project for European partners. It is increasing the uncertainty on the market, and I need to repeat it once again. It is not sure if Nord Stream 2 deliveries will ever happen. Of course, we have a big pressure from Gazprom to make those deliveries happen, even in spite of US sanctions, in spite of this EU regulation. But it is only a proof that Nord Stream 2 could be used as a gas weapon against Europe, and it is already used in this way. So it is a big wake-up call for Western Europe, because Gazprom is intentionally limiting the gas reserves in western part of the Europe, and is showing the record prices in whole EU continent, and it is saying we need to start Nord Stream 2 right now because you have heavy prices. And one of the reasons of such high prices in Europe is Gazprom. So it is a big paradox. It should be a wake-up call for Western Europeans. It is a great opportunity to discuss it also when the president of Ukraine and US will meet tomorrow in Washington. I am keeping fingers crossed for our Ukrainian colleagues. We also know that Lublin Triangle, a new format of cooperation between Poland, Ukraine, and Lithuania, was working to a big extent on Nord Stream 2 issue. I was in Międzyzdroje yesterday. There was a gas summit between Poland and Ukraine. It was also attended by Lithuanian Minister of Energy. I don't know what happened behind the closed doors, but I am sure that Nord Stream 2 was one of the most important topics that were being discussed by politicians, businessmen, and our administrations.
Okay, but you mentioned that the implementation of the third EU package essentially will hinder the supply of Russian gas via Nord Stream 2. But actually, as a lawyer, I know that there are very many legal ways around this restriction, essentially having several holding structures and essentially diluting the ownership, but in fact retaining control. What do you think about that?
Mm-hmm. So I know that the rules sine qua non for starting the deliveries is the technical certification, insurance, and regulatory certification. So when it comes to technical certification, you need to have company on board to do that, and one of the companies that can achieve that is then VGL, the Norwegian company that was cooperating with Baltic Pipe project, for example, and it withdrew from Nord Stream 2 project because of American sanctions. When it comes to the legal certification, the certification in accordance with EU law, you need to create a specific regulatory regime that the operator of Nord Stream 2 is working independently from Gazprom. And we hear from European Commission that they want Gazprom to sell Nord Stream 2 AG company to someone, so there will be a real guarantee that the company is independent, that it is not staying inside Gazprom Group, which is heavily under influence of the state, under influence of interest of Kremlin. So I'm not saying it is impossible. I am saying it is taking time and money. So it is not that you can start deliveries tomorrow. And if EC states that this way of certifying the operator is not in line with EU regulations, it will not green light the deliveries. So it is also possible still. It's not 100% sure, but it is possible that EC will not give a green light to deliveries by Nord Stream 2. And providing this project with further delays gives more time for countries like Poland, Lithuania, Ukraine, US to discuss further if we really should go deeper into this big issue for common policy, especially in times of greater risk of Russian aggression that we see right now. Poland and Lithuania, again, we agree that we see further escalation from Russia. So why should we give her a new pipeline to Europe?
Absolutely. Obviously we have a new parliament or Bundestag elections in Germany coming up, and in connection to that we will have inevitably a new government in Germany. At the moment it's very difficult to tell who is going to win and what the new coalition will look like. In Germany there are several, of course, ideas and discussions, but nobody can say for certain. So what is your opinion whether the new government, when formed in Germany, could change its stance on Nord Stream 2, or it will retain the same trend of support actually to Nord Stream 2?
I definitely wouldn't overestimate the meaning of Greens, which are totally against Nord Stream 2, entering the government, because according to the polls, they might not win the election, so they could have some impact on further coalition, or they could not, because, you know, SPD is rising, and we could see another great coalition between Christian Democrats and Socialists. So it's not sure that Greens will enter the power, but even if they enter the government, it is not sure what will be the status quo between all those factions. What ministries will they get? If they will have a real impact on energy and climate policy, I know they would like to, but it will be a policy of consensus between the biggest parties, not like one party government like we had in Poland. You have several factors, several actors, and a big incentives from German business that wants Nord Stream 2, because they only look at cheap gas, and that's it for them. They don't consider other issues brought to this discussion, for example, by Poland and Lithuania. So there could be some change of accent. There could be some issues on the European level. You could also have a new legal obstacles in front of Nord Stream 2, coming also from Germany, because German regulator is not like a bad character in this play. It is having different logic than our regulators, for example, our anti-monopoly bodies. But you know, different things can happen. But I wouldn't overestimate the factor of government change in Germany, and in fact, not having Angela Merkel on board could also mean a weaker German position in relations with Russia. So it is really an unknown territory. We hope that Greens somewhat will influence this discussion, and they already did actually, but it doesn't mean automatically that even their victory would mean that Nord Stream 2 wouldn't happen.
Okay, but you were talking obviously about our joint efforts of Poland, Lithuania, Baltic countries, USA up until the recent administration change. How could we impact this project? What could we do? What's your opinion? How could we, team together? What's our practical possibilities to impact it?
Okay, 1 second. So I have some issues with my phone. Oh, okay, it's okay now. So I believe there's a lot to do, and we already cooperate. We have a political level which is working pretty effectively last years. We cooperate in energy sphere. So one thing is to increase our common security when it comes to NATO, but also when it comes to energy security. So our companies cooperate. Our gas markets, energy markets are integrating. That is the best answer to what Russia is doing. We need to do our part. So we have this energy security. Doesn't matter if there's Nord Stream 1, 2, 3, or some other device delivered from Russia, because Nord Stream 2 is a case of today, tomorrow, but there will be new initiatives like this, because in the very heart of Russian foreign policy is this Falin-Khvichvinsky doctrine. I bet you heard about it. It is about replacing tanks with gas pipelines or oil pipelines. They are using energy for foreign policy. So as long as Europe is dependent on Russian hydrocarbons, we'll have attempts to achieve foreign policy goals with a use of resources. So Nord Stream 2 is only one stage of this big and long-term policy from Russia. So we need to be we need to have a higher resistance to any actions like this. So greater energy security, successful energy transition, effective energy production in a new regulatory framework, because we have climate policy, we have Fit for 55 package. We need to be successful in our field, so the German or Russian policy will not hurt us as much. And there is a lot to be done between Poland and Lithuania. One of the ways is to cooperate in renewables. We can together foster the resources of Baltic Sea. We could provide our countries with onshore wind farms. We have great capacity to invest in green technologies, to be less dependent on hydrocarbons in general. But we also can provide together hydrocarbons outside of Russia for whole Central and Eastern Europe. We have the refineries from Orlen, we have gas deals from PGNiG and Klaipėdos Nafta, or your Lietuvos Dujos.
Yes.
So we already provided the region with greater energy security, and we need to sustain this policy. It should be our common long-term policy that no politician would undermine that. We shouldn't let anyone, for example, protest Orlen presence in Lithuania and protest, for example, Lithuanian investment in renewable energy in Poland. We need to have a stable ground. If we look at Ukraine, it is possible that some pro-Russian forces in Poland could undermine projects like your FSRU, our Baltic Pipe, and so on. We need to be resistant to that. And when it comes to our external policy, we need to continue deep cooperation inside EU structures, inside EU institutions, to have a sustainable energy transition, but also to defend energy security in new dimensions. Because today we speak about gas, tomorrow we could speak about hydrogen from Nord Stream 2 and so on. Our region has this specific experience that lets us give great remarks about energy security. To state, for example, that we need hydrogen energy security, that we need to have a security of supply of renewable materials that are needed for our energy transition. We need to have a security of copper, of other metals that could be under influence from Russia and also from China. That is why, from my point of view, Poland should follow the Lithuanian policy when it comes to China, because you can see every day a cooperation between China and Russia. Also, when it comes to energy infrastructure in Poland, when there's Russian capital coming into Europe, there's also Chinese capital. They are sharing efforts in undermining our common policy, also when it comes to energy security. So I really admire Lithuanian policy when it comes to China. I wish it would be more of European approach that other European countries would follow when it comes to this, because of course we are speaking about Nord Stream 2 and Russia, but in 2021 you cannot allow us not to discuss also the China's factor.
No, obviously not. The world is much wider than only Russia, and the situation is really much wider. Geostrategic situation is way more complicated than only A and B. There are many players. China is obviously the most important one in that mix. But we have one question actually from the audience, which I would like to ask. I guess you almost answered it, but just to repeat it once again. Gazprom, apart from limiting gas transit to Europe via its export gas pipelines, is also persistently emptying the European gas storage facilities under its control. You mentioned that. This is leading to historically high gas prices on the European market and is a harbinger of a crisis in the coming heating season. Don't you think it is a method for speeding up approval of Nord Stream 2 before winter? Obviously, I guess you answered that.
Okay. Yeah. So, how much gas do you have in your depots in Churkans? Are they ready for the heating season?
That's a very good question. I don't have the figures, but that's a very good question.
They are. Those were like 3 BCM, and I'm sure that you are ready for the winter because you have this security factor in your decision-making process, and it is really strong. So in Poland, we are also ready for the heating season, no matter what Gazprom does, because our gas depots are full for like 90%. We are secure for like 3 weeks of gas crisis, 3 months, sorry. So it's totally fine for us. But it is a pressure against Western Europe, against their pockets, because it's all about the Western European gas depots. It is Reden in Germany, Katharina, named by Catherine the Great, also in Germany. It is about Jemgum in Austria and some other depots in Netherlands. It is about the pockets of Western Europeans who sometimes tend to look only at money, and they say, okay, we need to start Nord Stream 2 tomorrow, no matter what, because we need to have cheap gas and that's it. We don't care about nothing else. It is especially a popular approach in times of crisis, in times of Corona crisis also. So this gas weapon is aimed directly at Western Europe, at the best customers of Gazprom. It should be a wake-up call. That's why I thought so, that they should see this security factor in this whole conversation. They should stop to say that it is only a business, because it's not. It is all about the foreign policy, which is making Gazprom doing stupid things for the sake of Kremlin interest. We've seen in 2014 how Gazprom high bargaining on Kremlin call made this Gazprom company disappear from Ukrainian market. Ukrainians are not buying 1 cubic meter of gas directly from Gazprom since 2015 because of stupid policy of Gazprom. But in fact, it wasn't stupid. It was a hostile foreign policy of Russia, and we can see it in a different way, but the same manner when it comes to depleting the gas depots in Europe. And even if we assume that it is a goodwill from Gazprom, but it is lacking gas because it needs to replace it needs to fill the depots in Russia. It is also showing that it is a not reliant partner, which is not able to provide with gas when you need it. So, you cannot defend this policy, and it should be a wake-up call, but I'm afraid sometimes for some it won't be.
Obviously, Gazprom is trying to play the market and manipulate the market and to achieve favorable decisions. That's more than obvious. But you mentioned Ukraine, and everybody knows about Ukraine, that a lot of gas transit currently goes through Ukraine to Western Europe, and obviously depriving Ukraine of this quite significant source of funds for transit will have a very negative impact. But probably most of us forget that the same case is also true for Belarus. That essentially Belarusian regime under Lukashenko also derives quite a lot of funds from gas and oil transit actually to Western Europe. So depriving that regime of this last resource of funds will most probably result in further, let's say, not integration, but let's say swallowing of Belarus by Russia. What's your opinion?
Well, Belarus is a different case from Ukraine because it sold its own pipelines to Gazprom in 2011 for another gas decrease in prices. So Belarus is not leading its own gas policy. Belarus gas policy is made by Gazprom, and even if Gazprom would limit deliveries by the Yamal pipeline to Europe, it doesn't mean that there could be some gas shortage in Belarus because it will be supplied by Gazprom Belarus, which owns the whole infrastructure. So if we look at Belarusian gas market, we could perceive it as a part of internal gas market in Russia. That's why Lukashenko is so angry at higher prices, because he says it should be like in Smolensk. There is a reason for that. Lukashenko is not controlling its own gas pipelines. He has a say in oil sector. Still, he has some pearls like refineries in Belarus, but that's it. He has no control over what's happening with gas in Belarus, and that is why it would be so hard to provide Belarus with natural gas from Gipl and from Lithuania, for example, through Poland, because we would need to have an agreement from the operator on gas reverse supplies. And this operator is Gazprom. So it's not in its interest to provide diversification for Belarus. And actually, Belarus and Ukraine are on totally different sides of this discussion. Ukraine is avoiding Russian influence as much as it can. It is integrating into EU institutions, into EU gas market to be safe, and Belarus is doing just opposite. It is integrating into Russian foreign and energy policy. It is not a subject of this policy. It is an instrument of it, and it is all because of decisions of the regime in Minsk.
So essentially the battle for Belarus is lost already. Essentially.
Well, what? Sorry?
The battle for Belarus is essentially lost already.
Well, the battle maybe, but not the war, You see a new generation, you see greater anxiety with what's happening in Minsk. When it comes to energy sector, we could start with oil, and there were some factors. There were some signs that it is possible in 2019, but then we had the elections, which were not just, which were criticized by everyone in the world, and then we had awful things happening on the streets of Minsk and other cities of Belarus that made Western world, Poland, Lithuania, other countries inside EU or US, it made us quit this dialogue on possible oil diversification, other projects that we could enter. So, the Lukashenko rule is not eternal. He will go someday, and I'm not sure when it happens, but when it really happens, we'll have a lot of opportunities to cooperate in energy field, especially when someday Belarus could integrate into EU, maybe not full participation, but like Ukraine, full harmonization of EU regulations. It happened in Ukraine, it happened in Moldova. In Moldova, someday it could happen in Belarus too.
Okay, let us hope that you are right on that. But now let's maybe turn over to our jurisdictions, to Poland. I mean, Poland for many years has been dependent on coal in its energy generation, and to a large extent it still is. What about the energy transformation towards gas in Poland?
Mm-hmm. So the funny thing is that we tend to transform into gas when it comes to energy generation in Poland, and already gas is under heavy pressure from climate regulations. So there is a big tension between Polish attempt to replace coal with gas and EU regulations that are speeding up the whole process. Fit for 55 package is increasing the pace of energy transition, and it might be that we don't have enough time to have some time in between for too much natural gas. We cannot be over dependent on natural gas, which is already under pressure of CO2 prices, of new regulations like methane emissions that are coming, that are to come soon. It will happen. We cannot say it won't or we don't care, because we did the same mistake with coal in Poland. You know, we've had like 20 years to decrease our reliance on coal. We partially succeeded, but it wasn't enough. We need to speed up the process right now. There are discussions on social deal, something like Germany did, that we have a social deal that everyone agrees we are to quit coal at some time in future, like 2049, but we are providing support. We show alternatives to people who could be lost in this process. There is discussion about separate social deal when it comes to energy sector. There is no time to further delay those processes. I believe there is a great understanding of this fact in Poland. The case is to negotiate the terms and to provide mega projects like Baltic Pipe that is to happen next year, like new capacities from gas that are not making us over reliant on this energy source, because it is a fossil fuel in the end. And then nuclear power, we are discussing it eternally, but next year there should be a final decision. If not, I don't know. I'm talking about it for like 5-6 years, and we are all really exhausted by this discussion. Let's see some facts. And then further energy transition. One of the elements of this transition is energy market coupling inside the EU, exchange of energy. A lot of energy is coming through Lithuania. We have developing energy exchanges in Poland and Lithuania. So there is also a field for our cooperation, but the pace is speeding up. There is no time for further discussion. We need to see some facts on the ground.
Okay, but obviously we have this general trend or effort towards renewables, towards greener energy, and European Union has its own policies towards that. Kadri Simpson mentioned a lot of them today during our previous welcome speech of hers. But what is your opinion? How could, let's say, Baltic and Central European Europe countries, help, influence European Union policy on this climate change and climate change stopping?
Okay, so we are not an undivided team. Let's say we vote differently sometimes in EC. But what we can do is to reach greater funds. One of the ways of doing so is this initiative. It is an intra-EU initiative aimed at reminding the rest of the Europe that we are here, that Central and Eastern Europe has some historical differences, that it has some underdevelopments that need to be overcome, but that we need to overcome. So it means more money for the region. We should join forces to get as much support for energy transition in our region as we can, because there's no discussion. Everyone wants more money. So no matter how successful are we on our path to energy transition, no matter what our energy mix is, we could work together on EU funds. And the other part of this solution is to operate those funds. It's to make them work in the field. Common projects of interest. So the specific kind of projects inside EU, we should provide as much as we can of such projects, because those are the last ways of getting EU money for our common policy. So we need to use it. We need to go into hydrogen projects, biomethane projects, because that's where the money goes, and we need to be part of it, so we would overcome our underdevelopments from the past.
Very good, very good. Well, actually, talking about Poland again, for many years the wind park developments in Poland was a very hot topic. Onshore wind developments were, highly regulated and essentially became not really feasible. The new trend of offshore wind park developments was kind of introduced, and then that was the trend, at least 1.5 years ago. How is the situation now? Have there been any movements, positive breakthroughs, hindrances towards the offshore wind energy in Poland?
There is, as we speak, we have another offshore conference in Serot, Poland. It is a specific place where we have the biggest conference every year. And we hear that offshore wind farms will be built, that we have a new deals between companies like PG, Orlen, and external partners. The bad part is that we don't have the installation port decision yet. So it appears that the first offshore wind farms will be constructed outside of Poland. So a big loss for our economy. It's not only about providing energy, but multiple contracts connected to offshore wind farms. So this is a bad news that it won't happen in Poland, but it could happen in Sassnitz, where the Nord Stream 2 is also it has also the resource base. So it is not a good news, but those capacities will be provided. We have multiple concrete economic agreements between PGE, the biggest energy producer in Poland, Orlen, already, and Energia, another private-owned enterprise that is willing to invest in offshore. Other companies are looking. PGNiG, Tauron, they are also speaking about offshore. We'll see if any of that happens, really. But we'll have several gigawatts of offshore wind farms in 2025. It is really necessary to have it to supplement the natural gas generation, to decrease the CO2 emission, and to create grounds for further diversification, further decarbonization with an use of nuclear energy.
Again, coming back to our region, Poland is the main, let's say, source of interconnection of electricity markets and gas markets, obviously, as well, of Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia to Western Europe. At the moment, the project of synchronization of electricity networks of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania with Western Europe are ongoing. The first stage in the form of Litpol link connection has been built and is functioning. The second part, Harmony link or subsea cable between Poland and Lithuania is let's say in the process of being tendered and will hopefully start construction soon. What is the kind of opinion in professional circles and in wider public in Poland towards these projects and towards kind of more interconnection of Poland with the north, with the Baltics?
Mm-hmm. So there's no big discussion about the Harmony link, so cable, undersea cable, which is to allow synchronization of Baltic states. We are totally supporting it. The question was only how to do it, and we have this discussion behind us. It will happen because of Poland and Lithuania cooperating really effectively in this manner. Fingers crossed for construction and so on. When it comes to integrating the EU market, we have some specific approach from the Polish government, which is of course open for EU imports from different parts of the world, but it is also about preserving your homegrown capacity when it comes to energy in general. So the one restriction from Poland's authorities is that we cannot replace our own generation with import. We cannot be over dependent on import. So the percentage of import cannot be too big. It is necessary to exist because we had some issues in coal sector because it's really old and has some issues all the time that made us increase imports from different countries, and it was fine because that's all about the common energy market. It worked fine. We didn't have any blackouts, but in the long term, Polish government is also underlining a need of preserving our own capacities, and sometimes a big waves of energy imports are further impairing economic effectiveness of such projects. Sometimes it makes them stay offline for too long, and it is hurting its business case. So that's why our attitude towards common energy market is so mixed in Poland.
Okay, okay. So thank you very much for these very good and informative insights about our geostrategic position, our political and economic market situation, our developments in the renewable and other sectors. And I hope that you will stay tuned with our channel. You will participate in discussions and future interviews that we will certainly have with you.
Sometime live.
Yes, I hope that as well. That's our biggest hope of all of us, I guess, at these interesting times, but I'm sure it will happen. But dear Wojciech, thank you very much for your real good input on this conference here today, and let's see us in our next events and our future interviews. Thank you very much.
See you. Bye.
Thank you.